right? So please feel free to turn on your mics and ask any questions that you may have. Okay. All right. So if not, then we are gonna start planarity. Shivam, have you also seen planarity in your previous courses? Okay, okay. So was that an MA 2130? I guess so. Okay, great. So most of you would have seen planarity in some depth um, in your previous courses. So there will be some degree of repetition, but hopefully we will also see some new things quite soon. Okay, good. So, all right, let's see. How do I want to start this? Okay, so, well, there are various representations of graphs, right? So a graph, I like to say that a graph is an abstract mathematical object. Right? Just like you have so many objects in mathematics, such as groups, rings, integers, and so on and so forth. Um, but what I mean here by abstract is that it doesn't need it. When I say abstract, I mean that there is no specific representation associated with it, right? You don't need to draw a graph for there to be a graph. You don't need to write down a matrix, which is the incidence matrix or the adjacency matrix that you would have seen in your previous courses, to define a graph, right? A graph exists without these representations. Of course, representations are useful in many ways. And one of the representations of a graph that is most useful is the drawing of a graph. So a drawing, often called an embedding of a graph on some surface, but the surface that we generally draw on is a plane, right? Or it's locally a plane, right? That is a representation of a graph. Right? So a graph may have many different representations. In particular, it may have many different drawings, but those are just mere representations of the graph, and those should be distinguished from the graph itself. In fact, I know of people who were so rigorous that in their PhD thesis, they would not just put a figure and say this is the Peterson graph like I would. They would say a drawing of the Peterson graph. I think it's funny, but it's a bit too much. It's clear that it is a drawing, in my opinion. But anyways, you get the point that if you want to be truly rigorous, what you have is a drawing of the Peterson graph, and you should distinguish that from the Peterson graph itself. Okay, so and this fact is really important when we are studying planarity, where one of the main concepts, or in fact the central concept, is to draw the graph in a certain manner. Okay, so this is a topic of graph theory where we are actually concerned with the drawings of a graph. I think this is the only topic or the only module in this course where we actually really care about the drawing of the graph, right? It's central to the topic. Okay, good. Okay, so let's start with an example. Here is the famous graph K5. And the question is K5 planar, right? So all of you have seen in your previous courses that K5 is not planar, right? So I won't spend too much time on that right now. Let's just say that we all know, we have seen in previous courses that this graph is not planar. What about if we remove one edge from this graph, right? So let me remove one of the edges. Okay, so there is one edge here that I have not drawn. So if I were to label the vertices 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, the edge to 1, 4 is missing. Okay, now if you look at this drawing, okay, so I haven't defined what a planar drawing is. I just started talking about it, right? Okay, so let's put down the definition for the sake of completeness. Okay, and so a graph is planar if it can be drawn or embedded in the plane so that the edges will never intersect except at the ends where they have to intersect, right? So that its edges meet or intersect only at their ends. Okay, so this drawing here, so this is when a graph is planar. It is also useful to discuss whether a given embedding of the graph is planar or not, right? So this is not a planar embedding, right? Because you have points where two edges meet despite that point not being an end of those edges, right? So then the question arises, okay, so let's put down some more definitions. In the same spirit, an embedding of a graph so we are going to distinguish the graph from the embedding. Okay, so let's say the embedding is G tilde. An embedding G tilde of the graph G is planar if in this embedding any two edges meet only at their ends. Okay, otherwise that embedding is non-planar. Is not a planar embedding. Let's just not use the word non-planar for this. We will say that a graph is non-planar if you cannot find such an embedding. Otherwise, the graph is non-planar. Right? So in other words, a planar graph is one which admits a planar embedding. Right? So here what we have is a drawing of K5 minus one edge that is not a planar embedding. However, you can actually get a planar embedding of this graph. How would you do that? Anyone can suggest what I should do? So let me put down the cycle. Let me put down the cycle on 5 vertices as it is. And now I claim that there is a way to draw the chords of the cycle so that no two edges meet except at their ends. So how should I do it? Okay, so pull out 42 and 02. Thank you. So let me go follow that suggestion, but let me put 42 outside and let me put 0, 2 outside. Okay, and now what remains is 1, 3. So that goes here. And what else?
0, 3.
0, 3. Thank you. Okay, great. So now we have a planar embedding of K5 minus 1 edge. Okay, good. So in other words, K5 minus an edge is planar. However, we know that K5 is non-planar. And we will see a proof of that as well for the sake of completeness. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so maybe I'll put down this phrase that I said because it's really crucial, and I want you to distinguish between the embedding and the graph on your assignments when it's really necessary to. So generally, we will use tilde to distinguish a graph G from its embeddings. To give you an example, if your graph G is K5 minus 1 edge, then this is one embedding, G1 tilde, which is not a planar embedding. And here you have another embedding, G2 tilde, right? So it is often crucial to distinguish between the two, and we will keep that in mind when absolutely necessary. Okay, good. All right, so clearly at this point, one of the main questions is, how do you convince someone that a graph is planar? And likewise, how do you convince someone that a graph is non-planar? Right? So these are very informally stated questions. For those of you who come from a theoretical CS background or have been exposed to some of theoretical CS topics, one way to put this is, can you convince someone easily? When I say easily, it generally means polynomial time. Can you convince someone in polynomial time whether a graph is planar or not? But for those of you who don't come from a theoretical CS background or have not been exposed to these topics, it doesn't matter. I am going to stick to the intuition because this is not a course on graph algorithms, right? So the point is, let's come back to the raw question without making it more sophisticated. How do you convince someone that a graph is planar? Anyone? How would you convince someone that a certain graph on, let's say, 20 vertices is planar? And let's say that you yourself are convinced, you just need to convince your friend or your collaborator. Draw a planar embedding. Exactly, right? Thank you, Shivam. So to convince someone that a graph is planar is actually fairly straightforward. You know that the graph is planar. How do you know that? Well, you probably have a planar embedding. You just show it to your colleague and they are convinced that the graph is planar, right? Now let's look at the other question. How do you convince someone that a graph is non-planar, right? It should be clear that there is a fundamental difference between the difficulties of these two questions. One of them is straightforward. You just show them a planar embedding, you're done. In the other case, you need to convince the person that no matter how the graph is drawn on the plane, there is no way to avoid two edges crossing at a point that is not their end. I won't keep saying that. I'll just say two edges crossing, right? So when I say crossing, I mean at a point which is not their end. Okay, so this is two edges crossing. So how do you convince someone that no matter how you draw a graph, a certain graph, you can never avoid two edges crossing each other somewhere, right? Clearly, there are infinitely many ways to draw a graph. So this is fundamentally a more difficult question. So question 2, is everybody convinced of that? That this is fundamentally more difficult? Right? Okay. And this is one of the main points that we are going to cover in this module, that although it looks fundamentally more difficult, thanks to graph theorists who have worked on this in the past, turns out that there is a beautiful theory which, due to which this question is not much more difficult either. So, yeah,
Sir,
yeah, Surya, go ahead.
so could we like get ideas from topology for that, so that like we can take smooth deformations of the edges rather than like to avoid cuts and stuff,
Right. To avoid what?
like without cuts or anything, just smooth transformations of the edges.
I see. Right. So, so the main point that you are making here is that this subject is clearly related to topology, right? And that is true. We are going to take a very graph theoretical approach, and we are going to look at a different way of characterizing non-planar graphs that answers this second question. Now there are other, so just to jump the gun a bit. So we will see a result that some of you may have seen in your previous courses, although I think quite a few of you would not have seen a proof of it. There is a result in planarity called Krutowski's theorem from 1930s. It gives you a characterization of planar graphs or non-planar graphs, however you think of it. And from this characterization, you can actually convince someone easily that a graph is non-planar. Okay. So that's one thing I want to mention. It still does not give you an algorithm. So for those of you who may be exposed to algorithms, it still does not give you a polynomial time algorithm. But it puts the problem, the decision problem, in co-NP. But if you're not familiar with that, don't worry about it. In other words, it tells you that if a graph is non-planar, then you can find a certain structure in that graph, and then you can show that structure to your colleague, and they will be convinced that the graph is non-planar because that structure's existence implies non-planarity. Okay, so this is the graph theoretical answer that we will be covering. Now, you might ask, are there other ways of looking at this? Maybe algebraic or topological and so on. So there are other characterizations of planarity, most of which, I believe, can be deduced from Krutowski's theorem. I don't know about the other direction too much, although I do think that you can deduce Krutowski's theorem from some of those characterizations. So most of the other characterizations that I know of are mostly algebraic characterizations, either abstract algebraic or using things like eigenvalues, although I'm not too sure about that one. But there are definitely some characterizations called using abstract algebra. One of them is MacLane's characterization. And if I'm not mistaken, it refers to the cycle space and those kinds of things. Is there something which is completely topological? That's a good point. All of this uses topology, but can you completely get rid of the graph theory and just look at it topologically? I would have to read more about that. I don't know of any characterization that completely gets rid of the graph theoretical aspect or the algebraic aspects of the subject. Does that answer your question, Surya?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, but anyways, what is important is we need to look at some results in topology in order to further study planar graphs. So, clearly, the study of planar graphs is intrinsically related to topology. Okay. However, since this is a course in graph theory, we will not go into too many nitty gritties of topology, and we will often rely on intuition at the expense of topological rigor. We will follow rigor for the graph theoretical and combinatorial aspects, but we won't follow that much rigor um, in the topological aspects of the subject. So we will rely to some degree on intuition. And this is the same approach that is taken by Bondi and Murthy. So I'm kind of sticking to that. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So, what is the main result in topology that we are going to need? And perhaps some of you have already seen this. It's called the Jordan curve theorem. So, I would like to tell you about the Jordan curve theorem. All right. So, how many of you have seen the Jordan curve theorem before? Can you maybe put that in the chat box? All right. So, how do I want to go about this? Do I want to just tell you the Jordan curve theorem, or do I first want to give you an application of it? Okay. I think I would like to prove um, without going into too much rigor, because the proof is already in the textbook, so you can read it later. I would like to prove to you or show you a proof of why K5 is non-planar. And to make it more rigorous, we will then need the Jordan curve theorem, right? So I'm kind of winging this a bit. So why is K5 non-planar, right? So that connects to our previous question. How do you convince someone that a graph is non-planar? Okay. K5 is a very small graph. It's a very specific graph. So I would like to now convince you that K5 is non-planar. Okay. And as I said, we will not get into too many nitty-gritties of topology, but hopefully I will still make it clear to you that K5 is indeed non-planar. Okay. So what is K5? You've got 5 vertices. Any two are joined with each other. Okay. So let's call the vertices V1 to V5. Let's make a quick drawing here. Actually, why do I call them? Okay, sure. Let me call them V1, V2. Sure. Let me just stick to Bondi Murthy's notation. Okay. So typically, the proof that K5 is non-planar that is covered in most courses is using Euler's formula, which is one way to do it. But we haven't yet seen Euler's formula. I would like to give you a more structural understanding of what is it about K5 that makes it non-planar without going through Euler's formula, where I think some of the structure is under the carpet. Okay. So notice that you've got a triangle V1, V2, V3. Okay. Now, well, it's a triangle. So no matter how you draw it on a piece of paper, it's going to look like a closed curve, right? What do I mean by a closed curve? Something like this. A closed curve that does not intersect itself, blah, 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 blah. But let me not worry about that, right? So any cycle, in particular a triangle, which is a 3 cycle, if you draw it on the plane in a planar fashion, it's going to look like a closed curve, right? So you're going to have the 3 vertices, V1, you're going to have V2, and you're going to have V3. Okay. Rather than making a complicated curve, let me just tell you that it doesn't really matter. That is one of the points of Jordan curve theorem that we will come to. So let me just draw it for the sake of simplicity like a circle. Okay. It doesn't really matter. What is important, which is actually the main content of Jordan curve theorem, is that when you draw a closed curve in the plane, you partition the rest of the plane, so the plane minus the curve that you have drawn, into 2 parts, the interior and the exterior. Okay. Of course, interior and exterior, they are essentially, I don't know what is the right term in topology. Maybe it's homeomorphic or something. I'm not sure. But they're essentially the same. One way to think about that is to understand that anything you can draw on the plane, you can also draw on the sphere. And if you draw it on the sphere, then it becomes clearer that the interior and exterior are actually the same. Okay. Anyways, let's not get into that. You get 2 regions, the inside and the outside, which we will call the interior and the exterior. Okay. Now, the remaining 2 vertices, V4 and V5, one of them has to, well, let's draw V4. Either it goes in the inside or it goes in the outside. Okay. If you are convinced that inside and outside are basically the same, let me just put it inside. Okay. And now I need to connect it to V1, V2, and V3. So I'm going to draw these arcs joining V4 and V1, V4 and V3. But clearly, instead of these arcs, let me just make straight line segments. It doesn't matter. Okay. Okay. So now we have drawn part of K5, which is actually K4. Okay. Now, what about the vertex V5? Well, let's use a different color. Inside the cycle V1, V2, V3, now we have 3 regions. One of them is bounded by the cycle V1, V4, V2. Another is bounded by the cycle V2, V3, V4. And yet another is bounded by the cycle V1, V3, V4. Okay. These are your 3 regions. Let me erase the regions because let's see, undo. Okay. So I have to put the vertex V5. If I'm going to put it inside the cycle V1, V2, V3, I have to put it in one of these 3 regions. Okay. These 3 regions are also symmetric, as you can see. So let me put it first in this region, V2, V3, V4, the one bounded by the cycle V2, V3, V4. If I put V5 here, then notice that I can connect it to everybody except V1, because I have to cross the curve that corresponds to the cycle V2, V3, V4. I will have to cross that curve and go and connect to V1, and that will not be a planar embedding, right? So I cannot put it here by an analogous reasoning. I cannot put it in the other 2 regions. So I have to put V5 out there in the exterior of V1, V2, V3, right? And now I can connect it to V1, V2, and V3 because it is on the exterior of the cycle V1, V2, V3. What's the problem now? I still need one more edge joining V4 and V5. But V4 is inside the cycle, V5 is outside the cycle. Clearly, you've got to cross the cycle in order to connect them. Now, this thing that I said clearly is not that clear, and it needs a proof. And that is the Jordan curve theorem. Okay, so at this point, let me put down the Jordan curve theorem. So this is theorem 10.1 in the text, often just called JCT. Any simple closed curve. So I need to define things that I have not defined yet, but I will put down the definitions after the theorem. Any simple closed curve C in the plane partitions the rest of the plane into two arc disjoint arc-wise connected. So what do I mean by that? I'll explain in a bit. Open sets. Okay, so a bunch of technical terms from topology. But hopefully the intuition is clear. What it's saying is that if you draw a closed curve in the plane, a simple closed curve, we'll come to that, then you will partition the rest of the plane, so the plane minus the curve, into two disjoint connected pieces or connected components, if you like, but not in the graph theory sense. And so one of them is the interior and the other one is the exterior of the curve. Okay, so this is the content of the Jordan curve theorem. And we need to make all these terms precise. So let's proceed. But before that, are there any questions pertaining to what we have discussed so far? Is it clear why K5 is non-planar without going into all the topological nitty-gritties and just relying to some degree on intuition? Right? Right, so we did use the Jordan curve theorem without stating it precisely. Right? We got this curve V1, V2, V3. It's a cycle which corresponds to a closed curve in the plane. And then you have these two vertices V4 and V5. You put one inside, then the other one cannot go inside. So you put the other one outside, and now you can't join the two of them because of Jordan curve theorem. Okay, good. So in that case, let's define all these terms. Simple closed curve. And what does it mean to be an arc-wise connected open set? All right, so bunch of technical definitions. I'm just gonna basically copy them from Bondi Murthy. All right. Okay, so what's a curve? So I'm covering these things because many of you, including myself, to be honest, do not have a rigorous background in topology, perhaps. So let's just go through all these definitions and be... Okay, so a curve is simply a continuous image of a closed unit line segment, right? So you just take a unit line segment, or I shouldn't put vertices, I guess, and you map it continuously on the plane, and that's what a closed curve is. That's what a curve is, right? And for a closed curve, you basically want the two ends to be identified. Another way to define it is it's a continuous image of a circle. Okay. The problem is when you take a continuous image of a circle, you could do something like this. That is also a continuous image of a circle. but we don't want there to be crossings. That's the whole point of planarity. And that is why we define a simple closed curve or a simple curve. A curve is simple if it does not intersect itself. In other words, if you're thinking about the other above definitions using image, you want the mapping to be one-to-one. So this means that the mapping is one-to-one. Okay? Good. So that defines a simple closed curve, which is what we wanted in the Jordan curve theorem. And now we want to talk about what happens when you have a simple closed curve in the plane. It partitions it into two open sets, right? So that is clear what open sets are. Everybody knows that, right? But the other important point is that these sets are arcwise connected. And what that means is that any 2 points in the interior, for example, can be connected by a curve that lies entirely in the interior. Okay? So a subset of the plane is arcwise connected if any 2 of its points can be connected by a curve that lies entirely in that subset. Okay? Good. And now that we have all these definitions, let's go back to the Jordan curve theorem and let's just read it once again, right? So it's saying that any simple closed curve in the plane will partition the plane in the rest of the plane into precisely 2 open sets. They will be disjoint. Clearly, the interior and the exterior are disjoint. And these 2 sets are arcwise connected. Clearly, if you take 2 points in the interior, you can join them by a curve without going outside the interior, right? So, I mean, I say clearly, but it's not clearly. It needs a proof, right? And actually, that brings me to an interesting anecdote. So, my first rigorous course in graph theory was during my master's at Georgia Tech, and it was taught by Professor Robin Thomas, perhaps one of the main inspirations that I myself took to graph theory. And Robin is a very accomplished mathematician, very accomplished graph theorist. He's one of the people who's proved the four-color theorem, or what is considered widely to be the correct proof of the four-color theorem, or the first correct proof. There was one before that, but anyways, it wasn't entirely clear to people whether that was correct. So Robin Thomas and 3 others, they basically simplified the previous proof, and they got a Fulkerson Prize for the same. Anyways, point being, I was taking this course with Robin Thomas, and I didn't have a background in mathematics, and my background in theoretical CS was also not that good. So I struggled a lot with math courses, despite the fact that I really liked taking them. I often lacked the background. For example, I did not know what a group is when I started my master's. Anyways, so when Robin taught planarity, he stated the Krutowski's theorem, and he said that it needs a proof. And I and several others were not convinced that such an obvious statement should need a proof. So I raised my hand and I asked Robin why this required a proof. So all of the math students in the class, this was a physical class, unlike the online class that we have right now, they burst into laughter. because to them it was obvious that this needed a proof. Math background folks kind of felt relieved that I had asked this question because perhaps they also wanted to ask the same question. And then Robin explained why a proof is required. So if, I don't know, are any of you wondering why this theorem needs a proof? If so, please type in the chat box and then I will explain a bit about that. But if you are convinced that this requires a proof, Ravi, so what do you mean by yes, Ravi? Are you asking?
Yeah, I want to know why you need a proof.
Good. Okay. So that's a very natural question. Robin actually took a different approach where he actually proved the theorem. I am not going to prove it. I would rather focus on other topics in graph theory than proving the Jordan curve theorem. So why does it need a proof? Okay. Why does it need a proof? That is exactly the question I had when I was in my first course in graph theory. So I'll give you the answer Robin gave me because I don't know of a better answer. Right. So when you think of a curve, you tend to think of curves that are easy to imagine. A circle, a polygon, a convex polygon, maybe. And on those, when for those closed curves, actually the statement is quite easy to prove. I won't go into that. Neither am I prepared to answer that. For those kinds of closed curves, convex polygons and circles, it turns out that it's easier to prove the Jordan curve theorem. However, not all curves are as straightforward. So if you're interested, you can read about space filling curves. So think about it this way. Think about it like a maze, right? Of course, I'm not able to draw a space filling curve here, but okay, so this is not very good drawing, but so in a curve like that, the statement is not so clear anymore. And so if you are really wondering why this needs a proof, then the answer is read a bit about space filling curves. And for those kinds of really complicated curves, although they are simple closed curves, the statement or the conclusion of the statement is not so clear anymore. And that is why a proof is required. Okay. However, when we are going to study the subject, we are not going to be drawing space filling curves. We are going to restrict ourselves to curves that are easier to imagine. But the theorem applies to all closed curves. And since when defining a planar graph, we did not use the kind of curves that we are going to use. We did not specify that, okay, you have to use certain types of curves. We actually need Jordan curve theorem. Okay. And the reason it needs proof is because all curves are not as straightforward as convex polygons or circles. And you have these complicated curves called space filling curves, and there the statement is no longer clear. In fact, if I give you a space filling curve which is complex enough, you will probably struggle to distinguish the interior from the exterior. And that is the intuition behind why this theorem needs a proof. Okay, does that answer the question to some extent?
So what exactly is a space filling curve? Is it like non-zero curve with non-zero
Yeah,
areas?
so I'll have to look up the definition to be honest. Actually, let me see. I didn't prepare going more into this, but let me see if I can find. Okay, so well, turns out Wikipedia has something about it. Yeah, so it's using a lot of terms from topology that I am not familiar with. So I think I'm not going to go into it. Because best I would do is read it for you. So take a look at space filling curves. And basically, that is the intuitive reason why this result needs a proof, because we are not just looking at curves that are easy to imagine and the curves that we are usually used to. Okay. Thanks, Surya, for sharing a link. So, anyway, so if you're interested in knowing more about why this needs a proof, I would suggest that you read more about space filling curves. Um, but yeah, it is absolutely natural to have this question. I myself had this question as a grad student, and I have never bothered too much going into the proof of Jordan curve theorem. I saw a proof because Robin proved it for us, but since then I've forgotten the proof, and I just assume it to be a fact without bothering about the proof. Right. So that is the approach we'll be taking in this module. We will not be delving too much into topological details. We will try to steer away from topological details as much as we can while not making false statements, right? And we will focus on the graph theoretical aspects of the subject. Okay. But hopefully, I convinced you that using the Jordan curve theorem, one can prove that K5 is indeed non-planar. And complete proof is there in Bondimurthy. So take a look at theorem 10.2. And I decided to focus on the intuition, so I will not be going through the complete rigorous proof of theorem 10.2, but it's essentially what I told you. Okay. And as an exercise, as a as an exercise, see if you can prove using similar arguments that K33 is non-planar. I will give you a hint. If there are multiple ways of doing it, but one way to do it is to start with a 4 cycle. So in K5, we started with the 3 cycle. In K33, you can start with the 4 cycle. You could also start with the 6 cycle, but I would suggest going to the 4 cycle argument because it will give you certain other insights which will be useful later in this module. Okay, so start with the 4 cycle and see how you can argue using the Jordan curve theorem and other straightforward intuitive arguments why K33 is non-planar. Okay, and okay, so that's all I want to say for now. And tomorrow we will start already talking about planar duality. So some of you may have seen planar duality before, but we will already start discussing this tomorrow. Okay, good. So are there any questions or concerns? Okay, I'm here for another 7-8 minutes. So if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to turn on your mic and ask them or type them. And I'm quite interested in looking at this YouTube video that Surya has just shared. So I'll be seeing that after the lecture.
Sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there was another student who's crediting the course, but he's looking for a partner. So, is it possible that I can hook up with him? But since I'm auditing, is it possible?
I see. I see. Um, right. Right. So maybe send me a message on WhatsApp
Okay, sir.
and we will discuss there a bit more.
Okay, sir.
Okay, by the way, is it just the. Okay, give me a second. Okay, so is it Kushan?
Yes, sir. I see he's in the call too.
Right, right, right. So let me stop recording.